needed for repair. Women start a rice and selling store, so families could buy foldable rice and a time when food supply was unstable. Repair small fishing boats of small, most affected fisher folks so that food and income could resume quickly. What changed of that because of that choice? What changed? Families rebelled. Damages zones faster because harder materials were available in the island, particularly in our remote area, in situ Atoya and Barangay Zorin. And affordable rice stabilized food access at the time when supply routes were diverse. Repair boats allowed fisher folks to return to sea within weeks, restoring income and supporting community kitchens. Members benefited the livelihood projects, supporting food, security, and income. Trust, unity, and hinabangay spirit became even stronger as everyone helped decide and implement these actions. Most importantly, people felt empowered. The recovery was in our hands, not dictated by outside forces. This combination of decisions, hardware, rice retailing, and boat repair, is something no top-down project would have designed. But ECLR trusted us, the communities, and the ship prove that when people live, recovery becomes faster, smarter, and rooted in a real experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Doroteo. Such a very good last statement. When people led, response become faster and more impactful to the lives of the people. And so we have seen that what Mr. Doroteo and his team has done is what we call the funding freedom in practice. And we hope that we get to learn more about that approach. So we're going to shift now from a natural disaster going to a man-made disaster, a catastrophe, a big one, a massive displacement that happens also. The displacement that happens in Marawi, the siege that happened in Marawi. After the siege and loss, communities were told to wait, to follow, and even to receive. But instead, the group of Mhatet and her team has somehow organized a new group. And so, Mhatet, could you please tell us the actions your group has taken, which you make use of that funding that fully made people with dignity, preserve the dignity of the people?
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Hashim. So before anything else, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greetings of peace to each and every one. Now allow me to begin by introducing myself. I am the president of Senator Ninoy Aquino College Foundation, a private educational institution that once served 3,000 learners in Marawi City, Philippines. But in 2017, during the Marawi siege, our entire school, our classrooms, our offices, our libraries was reduced to ashes. Everything that the foundation had built in decades was gone in a single moment. Yet today, I stand before you not as a victim of that tragedy, but as an IDP advocate, an educator, and a survivor who continues to rise, rebuild, and fight for our communities after the fall. Now back to the question of Sir Hashim. One action that truly protected our people's dignity, something impossible under a rigid humanitarian project, was the community-led psychosocial healing and livelihood recovery circles that was organized for the Marawi IDPs. Most of the humanitarian programs come with fixed activities, fixed modules, and fixed outcomes. But through the flexibility of SCLR, we were given something rare and precious: the space to listen, to reflect, and to design our own solutions based on what we felt and what we needed as an IDP. And when we listened to each other, one truth became very clear. our recovery was not just about food. It was not about shelter. It was not about training. Our recovery was more about reclaiming our voices and our dignity. So yes, SCLR allowed us to conduct healing circles where mothers, fathers, youth, and elders share their trauma, their grief, and their hopes. These were safe spaces guided by the facilitators that we trusted, where people who once felt invisible finally felt seen again. But the transformation did not just stop there, because once we started healing, we also started dreaming. This led us to organize something that completely changed the direction of our movement. A community-led shared visioning and strategic planning workshop among the different IDP leaders of Marawi City. For the first time, we sat down together, not as victims, not as camps, not as clans, but as one community. And in those conversations, without any rigid project rules limiting us, we found our shared purpose. We discovered that despite our different stories, we had one united goal, and that is to work collectively for the passage of the Marawi Compensation Bill, which we all at first thought would be an impossible dream. At that moment, when leaders from various sectors, shelters, barangays set aside their personal and political differences, was one of the most dignifying experience for us IDPs. No more us or them. No more personal agenda. We acted for ourselves, but not for ourselves, but for the rights and future of all the Marawi IDPs. Now, through the SCLR, we were able to draft our own position papers, engage government agencies, hold dialogues with legislators, mobilize community consultation, and most especially, we were able to amplify the voices of the most vulnerable among us. This level of collective action, this community-led advocacy, was something no typical or rigid humanitarian project would have allowed. There were no pre-written templates, no fixed indicators, no by-the-book activities. It was the community leading its own struggle for justice. And the difference it made, it was profound. People regained confidence, knowing that their voices mattered. Communities rebuilt trust and unity after years of displacement and division. And together, we contributed to the successful passage of Republic Act 11696, a proof that when the IDPs are empowered to lead, real change becomes possible. And this is the heart of SCLR. It does not just deliver assistance, it restores dignity. It does not just support communities, it lets communities decide, lead, and own their very recovery. As an IDP, I stand before you today not as a passive recipient of aid, but as a representative of a community that's found its strength again. Because we were trusted with leadership, with decision-making, and with a chance to shape our very own future. And that is the power of SCLR. When you give the people the opportunity to lead, they do not just survive, they rise. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. I think most of us are yes, there you go. I think most of us are now well convinced about the funding freedom, and you've heard of that IDPs, blending protection, the social cohesions and livelihood, which in way standard project rarely allows. And I think what we wanted to ask for you, Mhatet and Doroteo, is that because on this way of funding, what changed most in how your community sees itself? And what's one thing you never want to go back?
Because of this way of funding, the biggest change how our members sees itself, so that how they recognize ourselves, or we recognize ourselves as capable, as first responders and decision makers, and not victims waiting for outside solutions. During Odette or Typhoon Rai, we experienced how slow traditional aid can be, especially for an island like Socorro. But through ECLR, when we controlled the resources, we saw that our unity, skills, and Hinabangay system were powerful enough to rebuild homes, restore livelihoods, and stabilize our food supply faster than any external interventions. The members began to see themselves differently, not just beneficiaries, but leaders, not just survivors, but planners, not just recipients, but partners in development. And one thing that we never want to go back to is being dependent on top-down, one-size-fits-all projects that decides for us. Ignore our priorities and make us wait for solutions that we could have acted on immediately. We never want to return a system where communities are easy only the targets of aid. We want to stay in a system where trust, flexibility, and community leadership guide recovery and development, because we've seen with our own eyes that it works. It works in us.
It works for you, and probably a lot of our communities here listening also could say that. Mhatet, would you like to add on?
Okay, so because of the SCLR funding, the biggest change in how our community sees itself is this. Again, we no longer see ourselves as helpless victims waiting for assistance. We now see ourselves as leaders, as rights holder, and as a community capable of shaping our own future. And if there's one thing that we never want to go back to is, we never want to return to a system where decisions about our lives are made for us rather than with us. We refuse to go back to projects where we are treated as mere beneficiaries, plans that do not reflect our lived realities, rigid systems that silence our voices, and a mindset of helplessness created by limited participation. Because once a community discovers its own power, people see their ideas and actions can create real change, and there is no turning back. Allow me to end by honoring the powerful words of the late Dr. Paduman Paporo, an IDP leader herself, a courageous woman, and a tireless advocate of the people of Marawi City. She reminds us that, and I quote, "Nothing about us without us." This words captures the everything that SCLR stands for. And it serves as a reminder to all our humanitarian actors, government agencies, and partners. Real recovery is only possible when people at the center of the crisis are also at the center of the solution. Now, as an IDP of Marawi, we have lived this truth. We have embodied this truth, and we will continue to fight for this truth today and always. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. And as you can see, there is a pattern here. You see communities self-organize. They also decide together, and they manage flexible fund and refuse to split humanitarian from development. And that the communities will now see themselves differently when they decide and manage funds together, and they never want to go back to being just beneficiaries. If there is any reactions from any one of you, or any statement you would like to add for that? Yes, sir. Can we give a microphone?
So nothing else without us. I would First of all, I introduce myself. This is Lashari from India, Pakistan. Today we talked about the conversation started with the compassion. There was 2 points: sympathy and empathy. Empathy is more stronger especially for the person with disabilities. And there was also in a second session there was a conversation about the reframing something that now there is a dire need to reframe that person with disabilities should not be only the beneficiary, but they should be as a partner and as well, to implement the projects and responder, not partners and responders. But mostly organization of person with disability, they are very expert in the inclusion. We talk about the inclusion, but only we say that person with disabilities are cross-cutting issue. So every INGO, every donor, whenever we knock the door for the partnership, they say we have included you as a cross-cutting. We are not cross-cutting. We should be engaged as a partner, as a first responder. So there is a dire need to change this and reframe it as well. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's also an important concept, and not just beneficiaries, but partners also. And that's also an example of funding freedom. So after all of this, we've heard from such statement as SCLR or Sustainable Community-Led Response. We'd like to know, how do we enable this? How do we connect these stories to a system? Here, ladies and gentlemen, is Ms. Nanette from ECOWEB to explain what makes this model work.
Thank you, Shim. Since we have very limited time, but since we have a very profound sharing already from our community partners, I think I can already reduce my sharing. Just would like to know, last year, I was speaking for them. And this year, I'm so happy that they're speaking actually by themselves. And as you have heard from Mhatet and Mr. Doroteo, SLR shows it's not about project. It's more of it's working, funding, freedom. A model that shifts who decides, who carries risk, and who defines success. And it begins with mutual aid group, community groups, whatever is the group, persons with disability that is there in the community. Organized by the people themselves, we help strengthen. They conduct their rapid analysis based on their views and perspectives and their lived experience. This step grounds everything. Communities move from passive recipient of aid, as you have heard, to strategic recipient actors, of aid actors for social and strategic change. And what you have heard from them, and also from the video clips, are stories that actually enable communities to prioritize their actions based on their not only needs, but based on their defined capacity. And SLR is made possible because with our partners, we are able to provide flexible micro grants through an empowering approach. Third, flexibility, as I mentioned, is not only about micro grants. It's really about flexibility. And flexibility of funding can only be assured if there is trust. And with trust, we ensure that we have this accountability. Actually, there's always this question. Can we really be, can communities be really trusted? Can they really be made accountable? With our experience, as shared by Mhatet and Doroteo, yes, it's not only upward accountability, but what we have ensured is downward accountability. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we were able to answer the first questions, what happens when the community led. But the next question is that, how do we structure the money or the funding to let this happen? Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Federico from Vitol Foundation to discuss that.
it's just me. Okay, but I mean, look, from a funding perspective, I hope it's a no-brainer. There is very little to be doubting in a model like this. I mean, all of the things that our colleagues here have talked about are representations in practical, tangible ways of the Nexus approach, of second-order impact, of mental health and psychosocial support, of social cohesion, renewing the social contract sometimes, right? Where it depends on the context, right? In a disaster-affected or in a disaster-created response versus a long-term protracted response that is driven by conflict, you need different forms of engagement. For a funder, what this model provides is a simple entry point, right? It's what SCLR provides is a framework, right? And that for me is the most powerful bit of this tool. The same model that works in the Philippines can be supported in Myanmar, in Northeast India, in Bangladesh even. Like, because you're offering a sort of flexible model of funding and there's a framework that also carries sort of certain upward accountability mechanisms, as well as down, because you're kind of certain that the downward accountability exists in the process. It doesn't. There is no. It is one of the few things that I feel like can be used as a one-size-fits-all tool, without necessarily forcing a one-size-fits-all outcome, right? And that I think is the most important thing here. I basically can turn up to my board and say, I met all of the requirements that you had through one process.
Thank you, Federico. We have just went beyond the time. We only have a minute just to wrap it up. Can we go to the last poll questions? Just to give justice to the final questions, we would like to know what need to stop or what changes that we need to go on. Can you still go on to the QR code? No more. No more. With that, since we don't have time, we would like to say thank you everyone for participating, and hopefully please do talk to our speakers here, have dialogue that works, and hopefully we can continue discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you also to our partners, to Charter for Change and Resilience, as well as for supporting all of our community works. And thank you, everyone. We also like to inform everyone that there is a session that's going to be conducted here at this hour now. So if you wanted to stay here, please do stay. Thank you.